Before we start with the video, let's talk about two important facts when it comes to building characters. First off, resin. The max for resin is 200 and it takes over 26 hours to replenish it fully. Then we have condensed resin, which you get in exchange for 40 original resin and a crystal core. It gives the same amount of rewards as doing a domain twice. You can have 5 of it in the inventory at the same time. You can use it for artifacts, for materials, for building characters, but it doesn't work for bosses and weekly domains. To craft it, you need reputation level 3 in Liyue. Then we have fragile resin, used to get 60 of the original resin. You can get it from Adventurer rank, Birthday Cake, Battle Pass, Sacred Sakura, Fountain of Lucine, Varanara Tree, and Stellar Reunion. It's advised to not use it before AR55. Then we have Transient Resin, which you can buy from Teapot. It also gives 60 of the original resin, but you need to be careful with it. It can expire in a week after you have bought it. As for talents, I will later say for which character, which talents you should level up. The best build for high adventurer rank players and low adventurer rank players will be visible on the screen, and I will talk about what the character is useful for and what team they are good in. The video does not cover all of the characters that are currently in the game, but only those who I choose as good characters to build if you own them or get as a new player. First off, Xianling with her burst sub DPS build. She is a very good pyro application. She can be used in many teams, including Melt, Vaporize, or, for example, Burning, because her burst non-stop applies pyro on the enemy. You can get her for free for completing Abyss, and use her straight away as she's not really hard to build. If she's the only pyro on the team, I would suggest around 200% energy recharge. If she's not, then you can go a bit lower to 180 or 170. You can put her in any team that relies on pyro for the elemental reaction. So as I mentioned before, any team that uses melt, vaporize, burning, or overload. And so for her talents, focus on elemental skill and elemental burst. Next up is Barbara, who in my video will have two different builds. First up is a Bloom DPS build, where she serves the same role as Xianling, but instead of Pyro, she applies Hydro. So for a Bloom team, put her with any Dendro character, who can apply Dendro fast and is not an on-field character. So for this team, Alhaitham would not be a good choice, but Tighnari or Collei could be. Same with Yao Yao. For this build, go with full elemental mastery, and for talents, level up only her elemental skill and elemental burst. Then we have her support build, which focuses on healing. So go with HP or healing bonus, and you can use her in any team that needs a lot of healing. So for example, characters who use their health to boost their damage or lose health by triggering a reaction. So for example, Bloom. For this build, also level up only her elemental skill and elemental burst. She's a very good choice if you don't have Kokomi, who is a 5-star hydro healer. And for new players, she's also a free character. Then we have Collei, who in this video has 3 builds. First off is a reaction build, which focuses on her reaction as a Dendro character with other elements. So we will choose to go with energy recharge, Dendro damage bonus, and crit rate, crit damage and attack. With this build, she is very good for any reaction that needs Dendro, so Quicken, Burning, or Bloom. And so for her build, only level up her elemental skill and elemental burst. Then we have a second build for her, which only focuses on her burst. So just like with Xianling, we will focus on getting as much energy recharge as possible. Here it's best to go around 200. So with this build you only use her burst and then swap to another character in your team. Then we have her support build, which is almost exactly the same as her reaction build, but with Noblesse Oblique instead of Emblem of Severed Fate set. With this change, she will do a bit less damage, but the team as a whole will do a lot more. She's a great character if you don't own Tighnari, and if you do own him, she is a great support for him. Next up, we have Lynette with 2 builds. First off, we have a Swirl build, which focuses on her compatibility as an Anemo character with any other element. And so we will go with as much elemental mastery as you can, while also trying to get some energy recharge, Anemo damage bonus, and crit damage crit rate. Not only is she a free character who's a really good support if you need some character to spread some element on other enemies, she also has an elemental skill which allows her to explore the area of the map really fast and easy. Then we have her elemental burst build, which only focuses on her elemental burst. And so the situation is exactly the same as for Xianling and Collei. So only level up her elemental burst, and when you play her, just use it and then swap to another character that you want to use. She is a great substitute if you don't own Venti, or for exploration if you don't own Yelan. Now we have Noelle with 2 builds, Geo DPS build and a shield and heal build. She needs a lot of defense as a Geo character, so we will go with that. You can also get some Geo damage bonus and of course crit damage and crit rate. As for this build, she's a DPS. Because she's a Geo character, there aren't a lot of elemental reactions she can do. So for her team, choose other Geo characters, such as Albedo or Goru. For this build, focus on her normal attack and elemental burst. Now for her shield and heal build. Here focus only on defense and healing bonus, as her healing and shield only scales off of defense. And so for this build only focus on elemental skill and elemental burst. She is a great substitute if you don't own Zhongli or any character that can heal you. Now we have Bennet with 2 builds. He is one of the best, if not the best, supports in the game. So let's focus on his support build first. He can heal and boost other characters' attack. He scales off of his own HP and his base attack. So if you want to use him as a pure support for damage, you would want to choose a weapon with the highest base attack. He can be used in any team for any DPS other than Ayaka and Eula if he's on Constellation 6. Now for his healer build. Just like for Barbara, you would go with as much HP as you can while also getting a bit of energy recharge. For his talents, focus on elemental burst and elemental skill. There is no other character who's a 4-star or 5-star who works just like him or is better than him. Now we have Sucrose, who's an Anemo support. She can group enemies and she's a great character when it comes to any swirl reaction. And so for her we will focus on elemental mastery and it would be nice to get a bit of energy recharge. As for her talents, we will only go with elemental skill and elemental burst. She is a great substitute if you don't own Venti or Kazuha. Then we have Kuki Shinobu with 2 builds. First off, a Hyper Bloom build, which is focused on elemental mastery, as Hyper Bloom is a highly reactive elemental reaction between Electro and Dendro. So for this build you will go with as much elemental mastery as possible, while also trying to get some energy recharge and HP. With this build you can put her with any Dendro character that you want to boost with this reaction. So for example Nahida, Alhaitam, Tighnari, Collei if you want. And so take an additional Hydro character. For example, you can choose Barbara, trigger a reaction between Hydro and Dendro to create Dendro cores, and then blast them with Kuki Shinobu. For this build, focus only on her elemental skill and elemental burst. As for her healer build, we will go with as much HP as we can, while getting a bit of electro damage bonus on her goblet and maybe healing bonus on her circlet. For this build, you also only need to focus on her elemental skill and elemental burst. Even as a healer, she's still a great electro application character, so you can use her in any team that needs electro. She's also a great substitute if you don't own any 5-star healers. Next up we have Xingqiu with his Hydro sub DPS build. So we will focus on getting attack percent and energy recharge on Sands, Hydro damage bonus on Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on his Circlet. He is a very flexible character when it comes to Hydro application because both his elemental skill and elemental burst apply Hydro and deal damage, so you can run him with any DPS that needs Hydro. You can also team him up with Xianling and, for example, create a team based on the Vaporize reaction. So, for example, you can also take Heizou with them. And so in this team, he will apply Hydro, Xianling will apply Pyro, and Heizou will make a swirl with it, and it will also create the Vaporize reaction. For his talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. He is a great substitute if you don't own Yelan. Next up we have Diona with her support build, where you focus on HP and healing bonus as she's a healer and she creates a shield. And because she is a cryo character, you can use her in any freeze team or superconduct team. For her talents, level up her elemental skill and elemental burst. With these artifact sets, she can also buff your other characters on the team, and if she has her Constellation 6, she can also boost other characters' elemental mastery, if they stand in within the area of her elemental burst. Now let's move on to Fischyl with her 3 builds. First off, her Electro DPS build, which is most effective if you own her Constellation 6. Go with attack percent on Sands, electro damage bonus on Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on Circlet. With this build, you can put her as the DPS in any team that needs electro, so you can put her with Dendro characters, Cryo characters, Hydro characters, in any other team that you want to use electro. Just a piece of advice, if you run her as the main DPS of the team, do not put another DPS there. Choose a support who will help her deal more damage. As for talents, with this build go with normal attack and elemental skill. Then we have her not so popular physical build, which focuses on physical damage bonus instead of electro. As for her team, you can put her with Rosaria to boost her crit rate, Bennet to boost her attack, and a Constellation 6 Yanjin to boost her attack speed. As for her talents, go with normal attack and elemental skill. Lastly, her reaction sub DPS build, which focuses on her reactions with other elements as cryo or dendro. So we will go with either attack percent or elemental mastery, electro damage bonus, and of course crit rate or crit damage. You can put her in a team with dendro characters such as Alhaitham or Nahida. You can also put her in a team with hydro characters such as Kamisato Ayato or New Villette for electrocharged. And for her talents, go with elemental skill and elemental burst. Next off is Faruzan with her buffer build. So we will go with as much energy recharge as possible. The best is to go for about 250 or more, while also getting attack, anemo damage bonus, crit rate, and crit damage. She is a great support for any anemo character that you want to boost, so you can put her with Heizou, with Wanderer, with DPS Xianling, or for example if you have a DPS Venti. For her talents, go with elemental skill and elemental burst. Then we have her swirl build, which also focuses on energy recharge and attack, plus anemo damage bonus, crit rate, crit damage. But for this build, she will not support other anime characters, but you can put her in any other team with any other elements. So for example, Pyro, Cryo, Hydro, Electro. And for this build, also go with Elemental Skill and an Elemental Burst. Next, we have Heizou with Anemo DPS build, where we will focus on attack percent, Anemo damage bonus, and as much crit damage and crit rate as we can. I would suggest about 1000 of attack, 60% crit rate, and 180% crit damage. As for his team, I would suggest Faruzan and some character that he can trigger a swirl reaction with, as his elemental skill stacks on a reaction with another element. As for his talents, go with elemental skill and elemental burst. Next off, we have his swirl DPS build, so you would go with as much elemental mastery as you can, while also getting a bit of attack percent and crit damage and crit rate. And so for this team, you would also need to put him with a character he can trigger a reaction with. You can choose Xianling, you can choose Kaya, you can choose Fischyl, or any other character that can apply their own element on enemy. As for talents, once again go with elemental skill and elemental burst. Next we have standard 5-star characters, starting with Diluc and his DPS build. For him, let's go with elemental mastery or attack percent on Sands, pyro damage bonus on Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on Circlet. For his team, we would go with someone who can boost his damage. So for example, we can go with Bennet, we can go with Rosaria, who boosts crit rate, or we can go with any other character who's a damage support. You can also go with a Vaporize team or a Melt team, where you will use a character who can trigger this reaction. As for his talents, go with Elemental Skill and Normal Attack. Next up, we have Kequing with Aggravate build, which is a reaction between Dendro and Electro. And for this build, we'll go with mainly attack percent and elemental mastery, crit damage and crit rate, and electro damage bonus. Elemental mastery is to boost the reaction. And for her team, we can put her in a team of 2 Electro, 2 Dendro. So for example, Kequing, Fischyl, Nahida, and Collei. As for her talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. As for her non-aggravate build, we will go with the same stats as previously, but with less Elemental Mastery. As for her team, we can put her with a Cryo character or with Pyro character to trigger either Cyberconduct or Overload. You can also go with a Hydro support to trigger Electrocharged. As for her talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Next off, we have Jean with 2 builds. First off, a healer build. And because she scales off of her attack, we'll try to get as much attack percent as possible, while also trying to get some energy recharge. And since she's a healer, you can put her in any team you want. As for her talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. As for her buffer build, it's almost the same as her healer build, but you need to swap her artifact set to Nobli's Oblique and her weapon to Jade Cutter. And once again, you can put her in any team you want. As for the talents, here you will also go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Next, we have Mona with 2 builds. First off is a Burst sub DPS build. And let me explain how her burst works. So, you use her burst and you don't see damage. Why? Mona applies a omen on the enemy in a form of a bubble, and if the bubble is popped, then you can see the damage. So, to use her burst correctly, first apply some element on the enemy, then use her burst, and then attack again to see the damage. And so, for her build, we will go with attack percent on Sands, Hydro damage bonus on Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on Circlet. As for her team, choose characters who can trigger a Hydro reaction. So Vaporize, Electrocharge, Freeze, as she can buff those reactions. As for talents, go with Elemental Burst and Elemental Skill. Then we have her support build, which focuses on, as I said, buffing those reactions. So we would go with Energy Recharge, as this is what mana skills off of, attack percent for Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate for Circlet. Try to get as much energy charge as you can. It's best to have around 200 or 300%. As for her team, you can put her with Nuvilette, you can put her with Tartaglia. She's very often used to showcase the damage of various characters. So for her talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Next up is Qiqi with her healer build. We will go with as much attack as possible, while also trying to get some energy charge and healing bonus. And if you want her to do some damage, you can swap her from Tenacity of the Millennium to Ocean Hued Clam set. If you have her on Constellation 6, you can use her to revive all of your characters or your teammate characters. You can put her in any team that needs a cryo or any team that needs a healer. As for her talents, go with Elemental Burst and then Elemental Skill. Next up we have Dehya, and here I have two builds for her. First off, a DPS build with Elemental Mastery or attack percent for Suns, pyro damage bonus for Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate for Circlet. As for her team, we can go with characters who will boost her damage, so for example Bennet, we can take Kuki Shinobu as she will apply Electro and it will give the overload reaction. One thing that you need to remember is the fact that if you jump while using her burst, it will end. And so for her talents, let's go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. As for her support build, we will mainly go with HP percent. For Goblet you can also go with pyro damage bonus, and for Circlet you can go with crit damage or crit rate. With this build you can go for Burgeon teams, so you can use Nahida, Xingqiu, or any other character who is from the Hydro or Dendro element. As for her talents, go for Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Next off is Tighnari with two builds. First off is a DPS build where you should focus on attack percent, elemental mastery, dendro damage bonus, as much crit damage and crit rate as you can. As for the team, you can either go with Hydro characters to get Bloom, you can go with Electro to get Hyper Bloom, you can go with Pyro to get Burning. Any of these teams would go perfectly with Tighnari. For talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Then we have Charged Attack DPS build, so we will go with the same stats, but we changed the artifact set, and instead of going first for Elemental Skill and then Elemental Burst, we will first go with normal attack, then Elemental Skill, and then Elemental Burst. Then we have Kazuha with two builds. First off is a support build, which we want to focus on energy charge and as much elemental mastery as possible. He is the perfect character if you need a lot of elemental reactions, so he is very good in teams like Melt, Vaporize, Overload, Electrocharged, and he can very easily group enemies. For his talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Next off, we have his DPS build, so we will go with either attack percent or Elemental Mastery on Suns, Anemo damage bonus on Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on Circlet. For his team, you can go with Faruzan to buff him, Furina to apply Hydro, and Xianling to apply Pyro, or you can go with Xingqiu, Xianling, and Bennet. As for his talents, go with Elemental Burst and Elemental Skill. And now we have Nahida with two builds. First off, a support build. I would advise to go with mainly Elemental Mastery, so get around 800 or 1000, and Energy Charge with around 110. As for her team, you can put her in any team that relies on a Dendro reaction, so Bloom, Hyper Bloom, Burning, Sprint, and Quicken. She can be put as a support for another Dendro character such as Tighnari or Alhaitham, or a support for characters who are Electro or Hydro such as Nilou, Kequing, or Yaemiko. As for her talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Then we have her DPS build, where you need to go for Elemental Mastery for Suns, Dendro damage bonus for Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate for Circlet. Here you would want to give her a support who can buff her damage. So you can go with any Electro support, any other Dendro support, or any Hydro support. As for her talents, once again let's go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Next up we have Zhongli and two builds for him. First off is a shield build, where you would go with as much HP as possible. It's best to get around 40 or 50,000, and you can put him in any team you want. As for talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. Next up we have his sub DPS build, where you would want to go with attack percent on Sands, Geo damage bonus on Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on Circlet. As for his team, it's best to put him with any other Geo characters, so you can use Albedo or Goro. As for his talents, go for normal attack, then elemental skill, and then elemental burst. Then we have Raiden with also two builds. First off, a DPS build, where you would want to go for attack percent on Sands or energy recharge, attack percent on Goblet or electro damage bonus, and on Circlet, crit damage or crit rate. It would also be good to give her as much energy recharge as you can. The best would be around 200 or 250%. For her team, you can put her with Hydro characters to trigger Electrocharge, or with Dendro characters to trigger Quicken and Spread. As for her talents, go with Elemental Skill and Elemental Burst. As for her Hyper Bloom build, go with full Elemental Mastery. You can put her with Tighnari, you can put her with Alhaitham, or any other Dendro character. Don't forget one Hydro character, because Hyper Bloom is the reaction of Electro with Dendro cores. For talents, go for Elemental Skill and an Elemental Burst. And lastly, we have a sub DPS Yelan build. And so you would want to go with Energy Recharge or HP on Sands, Hydro damage bonus on Goblet, and crit damage or crit rate on Circlet. Try to get about 170 to 200 energy recharge. As for her team, you can put her with any DPS who needs to rely on Hydro reactions. So you can put her with Wriothesley, you can put her with Raiden, you can put her with Alhaitham. As for talents, go for Elemental Burst and Elemental Skill. And that would be it for the video. Thanks for watching!